So a monochromatic color scheme is very soothing. It's very sophisticated. It has kind of an inherent calming effect when you look at it, and it kind of reminds us of those monochromatic prints in photography. Oops, sorry, skipping ahead for a second. Analogous is a color scheme where you're going to take colors that lie really close to each other on the color wheel. So for example, blues and greens are kind of all on one side of the color wheel, and when you place them next to each other, they have kind of a visual consistency. Like a monochromatic color scheme, they're soothing. They usually have kind of a sophisticated feel. And it's a really good choice when you kind of add a little bit of oomph. You don't just want one hue, you want to add in some more hues, but you still want that calming effect. You don't want a lot of vibrant contrast. This is an example of a chaotic color scheme. A chaotic color scheme is where you take colors all over the place. You don't really think about it. You just kind of go by gut instinct. You might pick a purple, a yellow, a cyan, a blue, a red, and you put them all together. And it creates this kind of really dynamic, charged color scheme that makes people want to look. It also kind of agitates, has that agitating effect, and it can be really appropriate. It can also quickly kind of degrade the content to be all about the color. So you have to use this type of color scheme sparingly and always have a reason or motivation for using it. This is another example of analogous. You can kind of see the soothing effect. Let's see complementary here. I have one that's complementary. Complementary, here we go. This is a complementary color scheme where we have colors that are actually opposite each other on the color wheel. You might have red and yellow or red and blue, and next to each other they really pop. They create contrast. And this can be a great way to kind of get a focal point, make your audience look. And I talked a little bit about discordant or chaotic color schemes. This would be an example, kind of two random colors. They don't sit next to each other on the color wheel. They're not opposite each other on the color wheel. They're just out there, and it's kind of chosen by gut instinct. And this is another example of discordant. Andy Warhol, which was the Marilyn Monroe print I just showed you, used this type of color scheme all the time. So this is Picasso, this is Crouching Woman, and it's an analogous color scheme. And the reason I put it in here is because I also wanted to talk a little bit about the way colors affect mood. So in painting or fine art, color was often used to express an emotion. The emotion in this case being kind of depression, sadness, loneliness. Complementary color scheme. You can kind of see how these colors pop out. Creates this kind of dynamic energy. Color is also a great way to create focus. So if you notice here, this red vibrant color kind of stands out. It pulls our eye. So if there's a place within your art or your design where you really want people to look, sometimes it's very appropriate to put a splash of color there. It really draws the attention. And you can kind of see that when you have similar colors or the same color, and then if you mix it up and put a different color somewhere within the design, it pulls the eye. So even though the yellow in this design is very subtle, it still pulls our focus to that area. And if it weren't there, we'd probably be looking here. This would be our focal point. But because it's a variance on that green, we want to look. It makes our eye really drawn to it. Wayne Thiebaud, he was a painter, and he used color really appropriately to create balance. So if you look at this rabbit here, you notice that our eye is kind of drawn to the face. We always want to look at expression. We want to see the eyes, see the mouth, see what the figure is thinking. Even with animals, we want to look at that face. And so if this strong blue shadow weren't here, our eye would be pulled to the face but then have nowhere else to go. So what this blue shadow does is it really balances the painting so that we kind of create a dynamic energy between what's happening here and what's happening here. And it kind of pulls our focus away a little bit, and we see kind of the entire image. It balances the painting out so that it's not so, emphasized in one area. Another great example of that, this is Paul Gauguin, and it's, you have these dark figures over here. There's something very ominous about it. We want to look at their faces and see what they're thinking. And then the strategy was to put kind of bold shapes and kind of create more dynamic color on the other side, even though it's subtle, so that it pulls our eye and kind of balances the artwork. So there's also this kind of visual effect where if you put warm and cool colors next to each other, cool colors tend to recede and warm colors tend to pop. So that's kind of a natural landscape effect as well. If you look at a sunrise, usually the dust in the atmosphere creates this kind of cool illuminated color in the very, very far corner of what you're looking at in a landscape, and that's kind of what happens here. These blues recede, the oranges and the reds really pop out, creating kind of this dynamic feeling of depth within the space. And this is an example of this. The red tree really pops into the foreground, whereas the blue makes it seem like there's a lot of space behind this tree. Warm colors pop, cool colors recede. Just another example. So I just threw this in here because it's such a beautiful painting. Georgia O'Keeffe also used a lot of blue, violet, purple colors, and hers were really even giving us this physical sensation. When I look at this painting, I feel cool, I feel refreshed, I feel relaxed. So if you were to actually paint a room blue, you would automatically feel cooler than if you had painted the room red. So there's this physical sensation that color can give you. And it's really interesting. It's a psychological sort of physical sensation, and you can really use that as a designer or artist in your work. Color also has kind of a strong culture and emotional significance. So in America, or in the United States of America, red is seen as a very violent color. It's also kind of used as a color that's not necessarily pure, so impurity. You'd never, for example, have the bride wear red to the wedding. You'd always put the bride in white. And I'm saying this is cultural because in other parts of the world, this might not be the case. So don't automatically assume that all associations you have to a color are the same globally. And this becomes really important when you start designing for a global audience. You want to make sure you understand cultural ties to color. For example, in India or in Japan, brides might wear different colored wedding dresses than in America. White might signify death, for example, in other cultures, and obviously signifies kind of purity in our culture. Oh, already saw that one. So just David Hockney, he just used color really appropriately, and he always had these really like kind of lush, vibrant color schemes. Example of kind of cool, receding, warm popping, but it's interesting because there's kind of a dynamic effect with this yellow here. It really contrasts off the blue, gives it this interesting visual effect. And I put this in, this is a poster, but you know, color, it was a very kind of beautiful color scheme, and there were these purples and blues, and then this stark white, and then this kind of complementary orange down here that really made the text pop out. But what I thought was really interesting about it was how the moon really created this sense of balance. Without the moon here, I feel like the weight would have all been on this side of the graphic, but the designer put this simple shape up here, and it just pulls the eye. And then the overall color scheme, I feel, is really kind of dynamic. It's getting that mood, that kind of dark, sad mood that the Glass Menagerie is all about, but it also kind of highlights the text and makes it readable. Jasper Johns used this color significance. What he did is he took, you know, very significant icons in our culture, the American flag, and he distorted the colors and created these chaotic color schemes. And our cultural association of the flag being red, white, and blue was unsettled. And so this automatically gave this particular painting kind of meaning. and significance, because we were searching for the red, white, and blue, and what we found was something really different. So you can kind of use that to create this sort of unsettled effect and create content to your illustrations and drawings and artwork. Beautiful example of a small dash of color creating focus here. We really look at this man kind of bending over. We look because of the action and the way the form is drawn, but we also look because of the color. We want to see what's going on here. And then this is beautifully done to balance out the painting, where these figures, if they weren't here, this would be such a unproportioned artwork, but these really kind of take your eye and pull them back in the other direction. Simple color can be very small. You don't need a lot of color to create emphasis. And so this is a great example of a black and white illustration. A tiny splash of color really gives the illustration all it needs to make it kind of pop, make it interesting. This is a beautiful example of warm popping and cool receding, and just a very kind of vibrant, interesting color scheme. And another example of the cultural significance of color. Obviously, this beautiful butterfly is not this kind of army camouflage color scheme, but putting it here kind of adds this unsettling effect of, okay, this butterfly is now signifying something else. It's signifying the military, which is so opposite what we want it to signify. Okay, so that's it for today. I'll continue talking about color. There is a handout for you on D2L that you can download, and it's just kind of a cheat sheet, has some information about color. And let me know if you have any questions.